Welcome back, LFA fam. So encouraged and excited to introduce our guest today, Miss April. I'm going to start off by kicking us off with a regular question, and I'm so thrilled to see where this goes. April is an absolute expert in her practice area. You are absolutely in for a treat. So, April, the mission of Love First Aid is helping heal the world one relationship at a time. When I ask that question, what's the very first thing that comes to mind in terms of how are you contributing to healing the world?
Yes, that is a wonderful mission and a wonderful
Yeah.
question. So, when I think about that question, the relationship that I think about when we talk about healing the world, one relationship at a time, is the relationship we have with ourselves. That relationship is so important as we are making decisions on our partner about who we want to be with and spend the rest of our lives with. And so I think that that is one of the best relationships that you can nurture and grow as we're talking about healthy relationships is the relationship you have with yourself.
We, speaking for LFA as a whole, could not agree with that more. What I found is that people, when they're finally sparked to seek support, sometimes it's in those moments of panic and crisis, and someone's asked for a divorce, or we found ourselves, with a relationship unraveling. And our usual is we don't control other people, we're not responsible for other people. So perhaps you should look in the mirror first. Totally aligns with what you're saying. So you do a lot of work supporting women
I
going
do.
through a transition or a divorce. What do you think the number one, or in your experience, what's the number one common thread um, with healing? No, that's a big question. But when you're encouraging someone to look in the mirror and say, hey, the relationship with yourself needs to be prioritized, what's the most common thing that you're coaching on through healing?
When when I coach primarily women, and
Yeah.
part of that coaching, part of that healing journey, healing after heartbreak, is taking a look in the mirror and understanding who we are and how we got to where we are in this space in life. The biggest thing that I hear and what I went through was the fear of what I would find. So, in so many cases, we go through relationships and it's so easy to look at the other person. And
Yeah.
so, taking that step back and saying, how did I contribute? Sometimes that hurts, right? To take a look at ourselves. After my third divorce, I went to therapy for real for the first time at 41 years old. And
Amen.
the first thing she asked me was like, tell me about your childhood. And I was like, this isn't about my childhood. I need to stop getting divorced. And my therapist was like, yeah, tell me about your childhood. And what I realized that the different things in my childhood had shaped me into the person that I was.
Yep.
And there was a lot of manipulation built around fear. There was a lot of control built around fear. And so I had to take a moment and ask myself, was I contributing or aiding in healthy relationships? And to be honest with you, I wasn't. And so I think taking a look at ourselves, the hardest thing is that we're going to have to face that reality, but we don't have to face it alone.
I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. And I just want to celebrate in a weird way that April and I are both members of the Three Divorce Club. So you should absolutely listen to us
Yes,
because six combined, we have learned all the things to maybe avoid and not do, and all the things to prevent that, from being a theme. So I would say between us, we've got a lot of knowledge here.
we do. Knowledge and experience.
Yes. So why do you think, yeah, so it is very courageous to be able to look in the mirror and say, ooh, maybe I'm not going to like some of these things. So for anyone that has done that, I honor the courage. And April, I honor the courage in you because we lead by example. Why do you think people are afraid to look in the mirror? And where do you think that fear is coming from?
It comes from a few different places. So it could be our upbringing. So
Yeah.
that could be things that were spoken about us For me, I was told as a child, you talk too much, stop talking. It could be our teachers, our coaches, anyone that influenced us as we were being raised. It could be culturally, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain cultures that teach, particularly women, you're supposed to be this way or act this way. I have a client who is Indian and she is dating for the first time, came out of an arranged marriage, and is dating like for the first time in her 50s. And so the things that we talk about culturally, it can also just be experience, right? You may have been in a cycle of relationships that has just torn you down, your self-esteem, right? Your self-worth. And so it's very scary because what we believe may happen is the same responses we got from other people when we may have tried to heal. We may feel like we're going to do that to ourselves, right? So this person isn't going to love me. I'm not going to love myself. I'm going to harm myself in some kind of way. And so that is the fear, is that we're going to get this same response from ourselves. And
Mm.
that's where self-love comes in, right? So in those moments when you're like, yeah, maybe that was me in that relationship, but how can I love on myself a little bit more? How can I invest in myself a little bit more? So it's just that fear of what the reaction is going to be, even from ourselves.
I love that. I was reading a book that I recommend to clients all the time, and there was one line that shook me and that I speak about often. And when I'm hearing the word fear, this is what came up for me. Um, Fear is the opposite of faith. Fear is the opposite of faith, and that super landed for me. So there's beauty on the other side of fear.
Yeah.
And there's power in being able to look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, these are the things that I'm contributing, right? A lot of times I think we push those things down for
Yeah.
many reasons, for all the reasons you just shared, right? We push these things down. And although it is scary to bring them to light, once we bring them to light and we can see it, way less scary. Bring it to the light. What was I supposed to learn from this? What do I need to change from this? And change is scary too. Like our primordial brain, right, is to keep us alive. So immediately it's like, okay, this is the thing. What do I need to change? And our brain is like, don't do it. Don't do it. You're safe over here. This isn't happy, but this is the devil. We know, stay here, don't change. And if you're courageous enough to push back, push through, it can be so, so beautiful. So I love that. What are your favorite things to talk to clients about in terms of developing self-love? That word means something different to everybody, but in your experience, what does that look like?
Yeah. The first thing that I do is I encourage them to give themselves grace. We come from a society where there's a lot of, you know, forgive someone else for what they've done,
Yep.
you know, trust someone else. But have we forgiven ourselves? Do we really trust ourselves? Or are you the person that you make the smallest mistake and it's like, you're dumb, I'm dumb, I can't? Talking about your language. I had a really good friend, that before I officially became a divorce recovery coach, I was coaching her, after her fourth, divorce. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we talk about is our speech. What are we saying to ourselves? What are we saying about ourselves? So every time she did something, she would say, I'm dumb. That's dumb. I'm dumb. And so one day I counted how many times she said it. It was over 20 times in that day. And I
Goodness.
asked her, I was like, do you think you're dumb? And she's like, no, why would you say that? I said, because you have spoken that over yourself all day, right? So we have to learn how to give ourselves the same amount of grace that we would give a good friend. And sometimes that's hard because we are like our worst critics, right? We are so hard
Yep.
on ourselves. And so that's the first thing I tell them, is to give yourself grace. And then the next, I think, big step is to get to know yourself for who you are now.
Amen.
So many times we think that healing means we go back to the person we were before. And that's not
Yeah.
the purpose of healing. And it shouldn't be the purpose of healing. You should be different. You should be new. You should be this new, amazing person, but you have to get to know this person now. and not 20 years ago, not even 5 years ago. I mean, I'm almost 48 at the time of this recording. My
Yeah.
divorce was when I was 41. I am completely different
Yep.
than, just those 6 years, those 5 years. And so that's the second thing, is to get to know yourself for who you are today versus trying to compare to who you were when that relationship started.
Ah, comparison is a robber and a thief, always. That's a really solid perspective, honoring yourself for who you are now. What I'm super hearing, like your friend that you mentioned who would say, I'm dumb. So I coach a boot camp. It's really awesome. So you coach women, I coach men, right? It's like 20 amazing humans. We were just talking about this last night. We kick off boot camp with values and beliefs, which sounds a
Mhm.
little bit like what you were talking about with your friend. So words have power. Words have so much power, and she didn't even understand she was using that word. So something in her subconscious was like, this is true. When she was saying it out loud, it was telling her conscious, this is true. And it became part of her. She didn't even know she was doing it. So
Yeah,
that says something in her believes she's holding on to a belief that she's not smart enough, she's not such and such, or she's dumb, when clearly she's not. So I love challenging beliefs. And I think when we're coming out of, we'll say, a relationship is dissolving, immediately, immediately extra self-love, more compassion, more grace. It brings up everything. I mean, men, women in general, like it for a lot of people, even if they're thrilled to be leaving, it still brings up for many those feelings of unworthiness, of shame, of all the negatives. And I think that's the perfect season to look in the mirror and say, how do I learn from this so that I can heal and evolve and grow into the person that God really put me here to be?
absolutely.
That's brilliant. Okay, so what's your favorite topic to coach on?
Oh my. I think my favorite is really walking through the healing journey. And the
Okay.
reason why I love that is because when you're ready, right? It took me 20 years to be ready. I got divorced at 21, 31, 41. So when you're ready, yep, cycle. See that
Very
pattern?
specific. That's a
That
very
pattern? Yeah.
specific.
Um, I love it because when you're ready, it's like putting this amazing puzzle together, right? You got all these pieces. You might not know where they go, but I love when a client takes a couple steps and they're like, oh, this fit together. And this is who I am now. And this is who I want to be. And, so the healing journey can be painful because healing hurts, right? If you've ever broken a bone, you've ever hurt something, sometimes the healing process is like, man, this hurts worse than the trauma. But what you get on the other side is so amazing. So I love coaching the actual healing journey. And that's something that was a blind spot for me with my divorces because I didn't know that healing was a journey. I was under this assumption that when it stopped hurting, I was healed. And that is so far from the truth.
Yep.
So far from the truth, right? I'm not crying anymore. I must be healed. My heart
Yeah.
isn't beating anymore. I must be healed. I really don't hate them anymore. I must be healed. But that was so far from the truth. And so that healing journey is my favorite part because, when we're able to just lay those, like the things we're carrying down, and I can see on a client that they're physically looking like lighter, right?
Yes.
And you can see the joy on them and the peace on them. That is my favorite part because that is the part that is going to last. That is the part, real healing is what's going to last. Real healing is what's going to keep them from the toxic patterns, right? Those getting divorced every 10 years. So that's my favorite part is that healing journey.
I love that. I think that that's really common. Healing's gonna hurt, but I'll wake up and be healed. My personal perspective is that people who fall in love with that journey of just constantly evolving, right? Because life happens and then we have new things, unfortunately, sometimes to heal from, that it's the journey and not the destination of waking up and saying, I'm healed. I think it's a verb and that it's healing is that constant evolution. And I love I love that coaching is becoming more mainstream because that's truly, I think, how people keep it consistent and keep evolving into that life with joy and contentment and fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And particularly in my, and I'll say Black and Brown communities,
Yeah.
our parents, our grandparents were not raised to ask for help. They weren't raised to go to therapist or find a life coach. It was, you don't share your business, and, we keep family, secrets in the family. And so
Same.
I love that is so much, that coaching and getting help is so much more acceptable nowadays
Yeah.
and available nowadays, right? I tell people all the time, I became the help that I didn't have. I didn't
Yep.
have someone who looked like me or sounded like me that I could go and say, hey, I've been divorced twice. What do I do? I didn't have that. And so I'm so glad that we do have resources today that we didn't have even, 10 years ago.
I feel that. I feel that in my soul. Um, the same for me. Like I'm from my parents are from the generation where you didn't talk about it.
Mhm.
It's the family's business. And it created a lot of shame cycles for me actually as an adult, which I've since broken down, which is why with my kids, I'm like, oh, you need support? Let's get you a coach. Let's get you
Absolutely.
whatever it is that you're needing. And I am so for normalizing. And honestly, like I want the opposite. Like maybe it was too open. But I love that getting support is being more normalized. And I think that that's truly what can one person at a time change the world. And that cycle stops, for me at least, it stops with me,
Yeah.
and my
Same
children
here.
won't be repeating, the circles that I went in. And with coaching and with therapy, that's one person at a time with exponential impact.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so I have a big question that I talk about all the time. So we've seen the statistics about divorce. So in the US, for example, it's like 50-50. Most first marriages, like half of most first marriages are ending in divorce. And then, like for you and I, those statistics get worse and worse and worse and worse. What do you, just in your opinion, like your perspective and your experience, what do you think the number one contributing factor is to the divorce rates?
Oh, I have a good one for this.
I knew you would.
I believe that it is unhealed people marrying unhealed people. Let me explain. So, when I started doing the divorce recovery work, I was like, yeah, this is great. Then I would have people who would come to me and say, I've been on this healing journey. I'm ready to date again, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. What do I do? And most of my clients are 30s, 40s, and 50s. So they're dating a little bit older, a little bit later
Yep.
in life. And so that's why I started doing the relationship coaching, which is essentially preparing people for when love comes. Is
Yep.
um, when I started doing this work, I would talk to marriage therapists, marriage counselors. I'm like, what are you guys seeing as you're, coaching or working with these couples? And a lot of them would say, especially couples who had been married, a few years, they said, we're not dealing with marriage issues. We're dealing with single issues that they didn't take care of while they were single.
Oof.
And that's why I go back to like healing yourself, that self love, that relationship
Yep.
with yourself. Because if we can learn to date in healthy ways, then I believe it'll produce healthier marriages. And so I feel like a big part of why so many marriages end, it's the people we are when we go into that marriage. It's the expectation of relationships.
Yes.
It's not understanding healthy relationships. It's not understanding our identity and who we are and how to communicate. And so that's what I feel like. It is simply unhealed people marrying unhealed people. And now we've got this broken marriage that we're going
Yep.
into. We've got the Disney mentality, right? This is what relationships are supposed to be. So far from it. We've got Hallmark. My mom loves Hallmark. And
Me too.
do you? Oh,
Yes. Oh my gosh, I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. I'm like, almost time for Hallmark Christmas movies. It's currently March.
no, you're right. So it really comes down to we've got people, humans, I was one of them, who did
Yep.
not understand healthy relationships. Now we're married and trying to figure this out. So I truly believe that is the root of why divorce rates are so high.
So what I'm hearing is on the other side of that is healed people heal people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Healed people heal people. So I grew up in church and it was a super common phrase that hurt people hurt people. And I didn't understand when I was younger. Like I always had this like immediate like ick. Like, no, that's such an excuse for me. That's the equivalent of saying, well, I am who I am. Like, what is that? But healed people heal people. So it really comes back to that common thread of knowing yourself, your beliefs, breaking those down, creating newer, healthier ones that serve you, understanding, we'll say, your values so that you can make decisions that align with those. A lot of people don't even then a high level understand what those words mean. If you say, what are your values? Men and women always say really different ones.
Yeah, they do.
So if you're living in alignment with values, right? If two people, one is like my kids and my home and serving others, women, blanket statement. And then you have men who are like leadership, provider, protector, and you can't get on the same page with how those interact. You're both in a relationship making decisions based on different things.
Right.
And that leads to honestly, in my work, I see that lead to a lot of fractures in relationships. When you
Mhm.
add to that unhealed, when you add to that inability to have healthy communication, it just it spirals. A lot of
Yeah.
times it spirals very quickly.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Okay, so one last like really big question. Because the divorce rate is ridiculous and lots of people are, we'll say, re-entering the dating world. I'm hearing lots of self-discovery to understand what you're looking for. Can you talk to me about dating after divorce?
Oh, can I? So, dating after divorce, what I found is I'm not going to say it's difficult, but you have to be more intentional. And that's really dating after any trauma of the heart, right? So, I
Yeah.
do a lot of work with divorcees, but I also work with widows and I also work with people who are like me, who are simply in and out of these toxic relationships.
Yep.
And what we don't realize is that heartbreak is a real thing. It is a trauma and your heart needs to heal. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, someone died of a broken heart. That can be a very true statement.
Yep.
When your heart is broken because of failed relationship, I mean, there's physical, we're not going to get into all that, but there's, physical trauma that have all the things.
Yep.
And so dating after divorce, we really have to be careful that we have released that past relationship. And what I mean by that is not just, okay, I'm legally divorced, right? But it is,
Yep.
I released any pain, insecurities, mistrust that relationship brought to my life and making sure that we don't bring that to the new relationship. Now, what I can tell you is it can be very easy when you're dating after divorce to get triggered by a new relationship because
Yep.
we see a behavior and it's like, oh, I know what that behavior is, right? I know what that is. The key, I think, is to have someone to help you along the journey that
Yes.
can identify those blind spots, that can help you through those triggers, to help you understand that just because your ex husband had on a blue shirt every time he yelled, this new man, every time he wears a blue shirt, doesn't mean he's going to yell, right? And so I think it's really making sure that we understand um, what happened in that previous relationship, understanding what we want from a healthy relationship, and then making sure we've got the tools to deal with triggers or insecurities, any of
Yep.
those things that may come up as we're starting to date again.
Beautiful. So to kind of go along with that, that I hear pretty frequently. So we'll say someone has released some trauma, understanding triggers, like really truly embodying embodying, right, that self-work, and they're ready to dip their toe in. When you've never been in a, we'll just blanket statement, healthy relationship. So we'll say you wake up and you're 40 something, speaking from a friend, not me, of course. You wake up and you're 40 something and you are, deep in your healing journey and all the things, and you're ready to start dating. And then we'll say you meet a person and it is a healthy relationship. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Because you've never seen it before. Have you ever coached through that?
Oh, sweetie, I just lived through it.
Okay, let's talk about that because that's the other
Yes.
side of healing that no, I've never heard people talking about it. And I have
Oh,
clients coming back now. I'm like, oh my gosh, like my heart is so happy, but would love your perspective.
yes. It is absolutely terrifying.
Yep.
So, at the time of this recording, I am 6 months outside of a relationship. That relationship was about 18 months long, and it was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had in my life,
Oh,
ever. But let me tell you, it was the most terrifying relationship to start because it was all the things that I knew I needed, but didn't know how to receive it. Right.
yep.
I was so used to dysfunction. I was so
Yeah.
used to, you're going to lie, you're not going to show up, you're not going to be the person you say they are. And this person showed up. They told the truth. They were
Oh,
open. And I'm going to tell you, about a month in, I was like, run to the hills because this is uncomfortable. This is weird. The difference, though, going back to healthy communication, I was
yeah.
go to him and say, look, this is how I'm feeling. Because he would do things like buy me flowers. And I'm like, why are you buying me flowers? He's
What
like,
did you do?
right. He's like, because I like you. And I'm like, what do you mean you like me? He's like, I like you. Right. Or he would, do things for me. And I'm like, why are you doing that? And he's like,
Yep.
because I like you.
Because I can.
Because I can, because this is what a man does. I remember we were doing something around his house, and I was like trying to help or something. And he's like, I'm like, what do you need me to do? And he's like, I really just need you to sit there. And I was like, oh, okay. But I'll tell you, it is terrifying. But how I knew it was a safe space. So that's the
Yes.
difference, right? Healthy relationships are safe. And I describe safe as being secure, affirming, fruitful, and empowering, right? It was safe for me to go to him and say,
Yeah.
hey, I'm feeling uneasy, honestly, because you're treating me too well. Like, and he's like, okay, let's talk about it, right? Why are you feeling that way? And so,
That
though,
actually.
right. So, though our relationship didn't last, and just for healthy reasons, there's healthy breakups, guys. Not
For
every
sure.
people, it was a healthy breakup. But what it did for me was it forced me, right, to do what I'm telling all my clients to do, but it allowed me to put those tools in place. So one of the things that I would constantly do is when I had that trigger rise up, instead of reacting, right?
Mhm.
Are you doing this? Where are you at? I stopped. There's so much power in the pause, guys. So much power.
Amen. Amen. Hear it
I
again. So
pause.
much power in the
Much
pause.
power in the pause. And I would ask myself, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And is this valid? And I'm going to tell you, 9 times out of 10, it was not valid. Because if I was
Yep.
feeling rejection because of something he said, did he mean it that way? And it's like, no. And it's because maybe my ex may have said something similar.
Yep.
This guy didn't mean it that way. So it is a wonderfully terrifying experience. But I will tell someone, so on my podcast, we just recorded an episode about why people don't date, why they've given up. And I will tell you guys, as scary as it is to get back out there in a healthy relationship, you deserve it. You deserve to walk through the scary to get to the wonderful. You deserve it. And so now, even though being single, again, that relationship taught me so much,
Yes.
so much. So terrifying, but it's worth it.
Totally. So, yeah, comfort zones kill dreams, people. Comfort zones kill dreams. Sometimes we have to push through that discomfort. And I really love the way that you did take a second to pause And that's something I coach a lot on. There's a big difference between reacting to something like that instant, like, where are you? What are you doing? Why did you send me these amazing, beautiful flowers that I really do deserve? There's a difference between reacting, right, and being slower to speak. Slower to speak is responding. Healthy communication is usually more into the responding piece. And I think I'm going to borrow that from you, April. There's power in the pause.
Do it.
Um, and I really like that you actually you used a process, right? It wasn't like willy-nilly. It was like, is this true? Feelings are valid. They're just feelings. They come and go. But is this true? Like, is this coming up for a reason? Is this serving me? Is this bringing up something that's not healed, or is this just like some weird lie I'm still holding on to? And then you chose to sort of release the things that were definitely not true, and move forward in a way that was responding because you did have that safe space with that partner. And I think for women, if we don't have a safe space, emotion for most women, what I've learned is it's just our feeling of emotional safety and security. If you don't give that to us or we don't feel like we have it, it's game over.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard the saying that men's biggest fear in relationships is being rejected,
Yes.
and women's biggest fear is being murdered. But there is this. I kid you not, it was a statistic I read a few years ago. I was like, oh my gosh. But then, well, yeah. But you're absolutely right. Feeling safe in a relationship, we overlook that so many times.
Yeah.
Keep it under the rug. And when we think about safety, it's not just a physical safety. It is, can I be myself emotionally, mentally? Can I be my true authentic self without you demeaning me or tearing me down? And so you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. That safety in a relationship, that I'm telling you, if you just listen to your inner self when it comes to that, it will take you so far.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm gonna pause right there really quick on a April and I were chatting before we hit record. Um, Lean into your intuition. For women, we would say intuition. We're born with it. We have it. That that initial feeling, trust yourself. Intuition can be a developed skill. Learning to trust yourself can also be a developed skill. So for women, whatever that intuitive feeling is, take some time to explore that because a lot of times it doesn't point you wrong. For the dudes out there, this is what I know to be true over and over and over, including my sessions this morning. Men don't say intuition because a lot of times it's like a too woo or it's too feminine. So for my guys, I usually say gut feeling. They have a gut feeling and it's express this to my partner or get them the flowers or whatever it is, simple. Keep it simple. So they have the gut feeling and then speaking in broad strokes, but in my experience, most men overthink to the point where sometimes I don't even understand how they got from point A to point B. It's like, well, she said this and she said this is the biggest one. She said she needed space. We might mean we need you to go away for 5 minutes. And now we're overthinking to, okay, I think she just needs to breathe for a second into we're getting a divorce. I have to move out. So this is two things, right? Power of the pause. What did that really mean? And also learning to trust yourself. So ladies, in being intuitive, intuition. For guys, it's that gut feeling. Pause.
Yeah.
Was because it's not all the time, but it's usually close to or is right.
Yeah. Yeah. Liz, I want to piggyback on that
Yeah.
quick. Sometimes it is hard to learn to trust ourselves, especially
Mhm.
if we have patterns, right? And so, what I would say to someone who's listening and they're like, yeah, I keep trusting myself and I keep ending up in a ditch, which can happen. I did it for 20 years, guys, is get a trusted community that you know will have your best interest in mind, that you can go to and say, I've got this gut feeling, guys, or my intuition is telling me this. And they can look from the outside in and just kind of help you decipher and say, yeah, what you're feeling is true, or wait a minute, I'm seeing the same pattern, right? I'm seeing the same behavior. And that is something that I do even to this day because I know my past of certain behaviors that got me into those relationships and certain thinking.
Yeah.
And so I do. I have a few trusted friends that when I start dating someone and I'm like, all right, this is what's going on, and they can call me to the carpet and be like, April, I think you need to pay attention to that. Or I think you're overthinking that. But these are trusted people, right? That I have allowed to say, if you see something, you need to say something. Like, don't let your girl get out there again, like, say something, even if it's going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah. Well, it's coming from it's truth, but coming from a place of compassion and love that it's incredible to have that community of support that's been with you that will absolutely say, um, this is what we're seeing, or you're being ridiculous.
Mhm.
For those that are maybe lacking in the support system, which unfortunately I do come across, maybe have been isolated or have chosen to isolate and really put time everywhere else and lock themselves and are rebuilding that community of support. I'll share a quick tip that I use, and then obviously I'm sure you have many. But if you don't have that support system who knows you to say, pattern, or no, you're overreacting, trauma trigger, sometimes to get that third party, what would you tell a friend? So for people when they need that, where is this coming from? Another way to take yourself and that emotion out is to say, okay, if a friend came to you and was saying the same things, what would your perspective be? Do you have any tricks there for those that are in that rebuild phase totally with friends, community support, all of it?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, is to try to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the support of friends, because I do understand that when relationships end, sometimes those friends go with your ex-partner, you do lose community in some cases, particularly if culturally, like you're going through a divorce and that is a shameful thing, you may lose that.
Yes.
Um, Worst case, go find a professional, someone who is
No.
non-biased like myself, like Liz, who, if you don't have that BFF, go find a coach, go find a therapist, but find someone that can help you walk through this journey. So,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. So we're the same age-ish. Did you watch Sex in the City the first, like when it was new?
Yes.
Okay, so there's this one line, and I think of it often, and I have definitely sent this to friends. Carrie's in the middle of, I think, a breakup with Big again, and her friends are they're like at lunch, so cute. And her friends have like had a little too much of her replaying the same thing over and over, and they're like, maybe you should talk to someone. And she's like, I don't have to talk to someone, I have you guys. So also, if you're in that boat, huge network of incredible professionals, mental health professionals, coaches who have not only been through it, right? The best coaches I have ever seen. And April and I were talking about this before we hopped on. A lot of times we grow, we heal and evolve into the person we needed 5 years ago, 15 years ago. We have been through the fire. For us, it's a total of 6 times, but been through that fire, right? And then we get the water, we go back and we help and lead the people out who are in the same fire that we were in. So there's always um, resources and support.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say just take the first step, right? Healing is scary. Like I said, it can be painful. Don't where I find that people don't do as well is we're trying to figure out like the next 18 steps.
Yes.
So when I was younger, I wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Love
And
it.
there is the movie where he's chasing the Holy Grail. His dad is hurt. He's got to get to the Holy Grail, but he gets to this place where it's like a cavern, right? He's got to walk across. But he's like, I don't see a bridge. I don't see how to get across this, but it's like just step. He steps out and doesn't realize that there's actually a bridge he can't see, but he
Yeah.
never known that had he not taken the first step. And so, though asking for help can be scary, you might be fearful of judgment and condemnation, all these things, but just take the first step and then the other steps will follow.
We talk about that a lot. I had a group session yesterday on this topic, and I think it's human nature to want to know the next 18 steps.
Mhm.
take a step today. We're going to worry about today. We're going to be present and mindful and celebratory and have gratitude, even if today doesn't feel that great, right? Tomorrow will worry about itself.
Yeah.
All right, beautiful. So, as we are wrapping up, I'd love to ask this question. So, if there is one thing, so if someone hears this episode and they're like, who are those really two amazing people with a lot of divorces who are super smart and I want to hang out with them? What's the one thing that you really hope is landing for someone that's listening? Number one takeaway, number one piece of wisdom that you'd really just to like to impart on the LFA world today.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing is to remember that you were made for love. I believe that we were created to be loved. And whether that is loving on yourself in this season, whether
Yeah.
that is being loved by another person in a relationship, but just remembering that you were made for love. And I think that thought process keeps us out of a lot of negative situations, keeps us from a lot of the negative thinking and self talk that we impose on ourselves. If we just remind ourselves that I was made for love, like I was made to be loved. So never forget that you're made to be loved.
Amen. And I love that speaking love and light over yourself. I think I might borrow that too. 22 years in, and I still am obsessed with learning from other people and their journeys. April, you're amazing. We will have all of April's deets linked with this episode. So, with much gratitude, sending you guys off to have a beautiful and brilliant day. April, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was such an honor.
Amen.